Look out, it's Faith Talk Live. I'm Rick Probst.
And I'm Dan Ratcliffe. Hope you're having a great day.
Yeah, we are. If you're watching Facebook Live or YouTube Live there, the legend there in the screen, Steve Brown. Steve, how are you?
I'm doing good, guys, and have been looking forward to this time with you.
We always have a great time with you. We appreciate your time. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about, a number of things, but 35 years ago, you decided to do Key Life with Steve Brown. What was, whose idea was that?
Well, actually, I really didn't decide. It was kind of a surprise to me. I'm one of those people. My life verse is from Ecclesiastes. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. That's not very popular because everybody thinks you ought to have goals, but I have none. I was a pastor at a church, and we taped those sermons, and a friend of mine, a Jewish believer whom I love, Eddie Waxer, said, "Look, why don't you offer those tapes free?" And I said something pastoral like, "Are you a fruitcake? I'm going to do that. We'll go broke." And he said, "All right, I'll put some money in the bank, and if you ever have to draw on it, I'll back you up." I never had to draw on it. In fact, that thing took off, and we were sending out eventually hundreds of thousands of tapes. And a radio person, friend of mine, said, "Would you let me put this on the air?" And I had been in commercial radio. And by the way, commercial radio pays a lot better than Christian radio. and I said, "Yeah, you can do that if you want to do it."
Yeah.
And he did. And we were told that we would probably get 2 or 3 responses, and then it would build if God decided to honor it. And we got we were just inundated with responses on 4 radio stations. And the guy that was working with me came into my study and said, "Steve, this is crazy. They're writing us like we're some big ministry, and it's just you and me, and it's mostly me." That is the beginning, and it really took place that way. I didn't plan it. There were a lot of people that came alongside to help, and frankly, I've been quite surprised that we've gone 35 years. When we started this, I had hair. I didn't have all these wrinkles.
Radio will do that to you, Steve.
Yeah, it'll do it to you. Radio will do it to you. But
That
anyway,
in ministry,
that's how
right?
it started. Yeah. And we've gone for 35 years, and a lot of good stuff and some bad. Who was the old pastor that said, "When I was 20, I wanted to win the world to Christ. When I was 30, I wanted to win my city. When I was 40, I wanted to win my church. And when I was 50, I prayed, Lord, don't let me lose too many." I kind of feel that way after 35 years, but it's been good. And I've loved the time.
Steve Brown, the founder of Key Life. And Steve, obviously, one reason I think people love you is just you've got that voice that just sounds like you just want to listen to it forever because it's a great, deep voice. And you're a great storyteller. And I think that speaks a lot for how God uses you.
You know, it gets old. Just being a pretty voice.
And you're a pretty face too. If you're watching, he's the good looking one of the 3 of us. Yeah.
And you know, this voice is like the grace that I teach. I didn't have a thing to do with it. My mother said I sounded like a burp when I came out of the room. I've had people, I've had this happen a number of times. People said, "Brown, I don't like you. I don't like what you teach. But when I can't sleep at night, I put on your voice." and it helps me sleep. So
Wow.
there is a blessing in this beyond the teaching.
Yeah, for sure.
Steve Brown, the founder of Key Life, 35 years. Steve, do you think it's been, from the beginning, did you start off with grace? I know you've always talked about God's not mad at you, which is really cool, and which is something that's not popular, throughout the decades. But has it always been mainly grace?
Rick, I think it has. When I left the pastorate, I was very close to a major breakdown. Nobody knew it because I have this deep voice and I keep up a good front. But I really, I was traveling 150, 200 days a year, turning out a book a year, trying to be a pastor and a father. And I just couldn't. I was in my study and I broke down and started weeping. And it was after midnight. And I said to the Lord, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to die. And I'd rather die than do this anymore. And I'm not a mystic or contemplative or anything. But that time, Jesus came, an amazing sense of peace and the message that I didn't have to do it anymore. I spent a year after that trying to find out how did I get into that kind of place, dark place. I read we developed a seminar that we taught all over the country called Born Free that came out of that particular experience. We flew 25 people to Atlanta. Half of them, well, you can't half 25, but some of them were counselors and psychologists and the others biblical scholars. So I wouldn't do anything heretical. And, but during that time, I went through my sermons and I'm not a very organized person, but I have notebooks of when you're as old as dirt, you got a lot of them. And I sat on the floor and pulled one after another, reading sermons I'd preached. And I realized, that theme of grace and God's kindness and mercy was always there. I just didn't think it applied to me. Guys, we have over 4,000 pastors on our mailing list.
Wow.
And I get it. The last person a pastor applies the message to, if it's one of mercy and grace and release from shame, is himself or herself. And it was there. It's become far more intentional and more controversial. I didn't mean for it to be that way, but it evidently makes people angry. And the good thing about being old, and there aren't a lot of good things about it. Somebody said, old people are already irritated at being old. It takes very little to tick them off. But one of the good things about being old is I don't care. I'm not trying to get another church, or I've got enough money to pay the mortgage. I can take my wife to dinner.
Yeah.
I don't want anything from anybody. And by the way, if you want to find the truth, you want to hear the truth, find an old person, because they don't give a rip. They'll tell you the truth. So now I really believe that the essence of the Christian faith is God's grace and mercy and forgiveness. And when I say God's not angry at you, I'm not talking to pagans. They don't care.
Right.
I'm talking to believers. Most believers think that God is angry, and he's really not.
Wow. That's so good. That's so good, Steve.
I'm talking to
really
Steve
good.
Brown of Key Life. And Steve, real quick, before we have to go to a break, I want to ask you about a new book you've got on the website there, Talk the Walk, How to Be Right Without Being Insufferable. I love that title. Tell us a little bit about that and how that came about.
Well, we are right, by the way, as Christians.
Mhm.
We're not right about everything, but we're right about the verities of the Christian faith.
Right.
And we can't compromise that. We can't back off. We can't turn the wine into water. It's a revelation, and it's been given to us. The issue is, how do you get people who don't want to hear it to listen?
Right.
And that book, one of the truly great books of Christendom, by the way, that book is practical ways that you can do that, primarily by creating questions. Christians pagans have us figured. They know what we're going to say and how we're going to say it. We read Christian books and eat Christian cookies and wear Christian underwear, and they got our number. And so what we've got to do is to break out of that. We got to do something astonishing and surprising. And we rarely do that. We don't go to certain places or say certain things or do certain things. Now, I'm not talking about sinful, revealed sin things. People always say I encourage sin. People were doing fine on that before I came along. But I do believe that we need to be different. I teach students at seminary that when they're working on their sermon, if they think, I don't believe I ought to say that, that's probably exactly what they ought to say. Mm-hmm. Because it's a sin to bore people. More than it's a sin to shock them. And that's true with Christians too. It's a sin to bore people a lot more than it is to shock them. Mm-hmm. So do some shock and awe. And when people ask questions, make sure you got an answer. Mm-hmm. Not from Sinai, because we don't ever speak from Sinai. We're too screwed up. But speak honestly, and people will listen.
Mm-hmm. That's so good. Steve Brown, Key Life, keylife.org. You can hear Steve on Faith Talk Atlanta. Steve, I was on your website, and I love what you're doing there. I love the whole pandemics and politics with you and just a number of folks there. You had a young man. His name is Zach. He's a mega church pastor. I think he's really cool. I want to be him when I get his age. But I love
him like a son. He is something else.
I didn't hear the church that he pastors, but who came up with that idea? I think that's a great idea, that whole Zoom and getting their spin on things, and then you do the end. It's really cool.
Yeah. The name of his church is Summit Church, and it's one of those mega churches. And he may be the most authentic Christian communicator I've ever heard. I mean, he says things that I find shocking, and so you got to do a lot to shock somebody like me. And he's so childlike. He doesn't have any armor, and he's a delight. He's a former student, and he tells the story. So I'm not violating a confidence. He and his girlfriend, now his wife, were babysitting a couple, and she was the music director of a large church here, and their little son drowned in the swimming pool. Mm. Zach ended up fleeing to California, finally came back. The mother of that little boy, Vicky, is unbelievable. I've told her every time Zach leads somebody to Christ and people are touched by his ministry, it's because of you, because she loved him without condition.
Wow.
And it took years. He wrote me an angry email. I never met him and refused to sign it. And I challenged whoever it was to meet me for lunch. And he said he almost died, but I was the first one that he shared that story with and what he'd gone through. And we prayed together, and man, what God has done, broke him, and now uses him in a as you have experienced, in a wonderful way.
Wow. Steve Brown, 35 years. Steve, here's to 35 plus more as you continue ministry. Thanks for what you do. Thanks for going over the edge and, again, using technology and other voices. It's good stuff. KeyLife.org is the place to go to, FaithTalkAtlanta.com. Check out Steve's website. Great stuff there. Books, video, audio, you name it's right there. Steve, blessings to you, your wife, your family, your grandkids. We love
you guys. I've loved this time. Thanks for taking it with me. I'll have a good day because of you.
We appreciate you.
Yeah, I think, Steve would have been a good stand-up guy, too, if he'd have never got into ministry as well. Steve Brown, Key
It's
Life.
a gift of sarcasm for sure.
KeyLife.org. We got to go to a break. We'll be right back. I'm Rick Probst.
And I'm Dan Ratcliffe.
This is Faith Talk Live.